2025 has just begun, and we already have so much to talk about. Trump continued to insult Canada, Greenland, and Panama, refusing to answer whether he would use military force against them, and Republicans in Congress are out crazying themselves. Let's talk about all of that and more in the news of the week. First, I want to talk about some positive things that happened this week. The U.S. jobs report was released, and to the disappointment of Fox News, it was much better than expected. The U.S. economy added almost 260,000 jobs in December alone. According to the latest tally, the U.S. economy added over 17 million jobs the last 4 years, tripling the amount of jobs added during Trump's first term. The Biden administration also expanded protections for migrants. Biden extends temporary protections for more than 800,000 immigrants. U.S. President moves to shield roughly 230,000 Salvadorians and 600,000 Venezuelans against Trump administration. The Biden administration on Friday extended temporary humanitarian protections for about 230,000 Salvadorians and 600,000 Venezuelans living in the U.S. in an effort to shield those groups from an incoming Trump administration that has promised to deport them. The Biden administration also took action this week to protect our coastlines from offshore drilling, which Trump was not pleased with and mentioned at his press conference this week. This was also the 4-year anniversary of January 6th and Trump's attack on the Capitol. And on Monday, Congress certified the election without any violence. Let's get into the MAGA drama. The Senate voted 84-9 this week to begin debate on the Lake and Riley Act, which passed the House with bipartisan support. This act targets undocumented immigrants and requires ICE to take custody of people who are here illegally if they commit crimes like theft or shoplifting. Republicans ran on two things, securing the border and deporting immigrants, and lots of voters stated that they voted for Trump because of crime and the border. So we are absolutely going to see a shift right in our government, especially on this issue. But Senate Democrats do have some concerns with this bill. They want to pass an amendment that would add protections for DACA recipients. Dreamers are here legally, but Trump and MAGA want to end protections for them. Hard to say whether this bill is going to pass yet, but if it gets to Trump's desk, he'll definitely sign it. Senator John Fetterman, who ran on a progressive platform, has started to dip his toe into the MAGA world. He's the first sitting Democratic senator to say that he's going to visit Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, and he was asked about what he's getting out of this visit to see Trump, and his response was pretty obnoxious.
Hey, Senator. Can we ask you what you hope to get out of your visit to Mar-a-Lago to talk to Donald Trump?
What are we talking about here? Is there some news?
There's some news. We hear that you're going to be heading down to Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yes, I've heard that. Yeah.
What will you be discussing with the president?
Well, yeah, I demand that I need to be made Pope of Greenland.
Do you have the resume to be Pope?
I'm having a conversation like he's the president, he's going to be. So, I am not the senator for just Democrats in Pennsylvania. I'm everyone's senator in Pennsylvania. And so it's just having a conversation with the president.
He jokes around about being named the Pope of Greenland, which is dumb because there's only one Pope. Each country doesn't get their own Pope. But he's also making light and making a joke of something that the people of Greenland and Denmark see as a threat. He also acts like it's totally normal to go down to Mar-a-Lago and kiss Trump's ring, but he literally doesn't have to do this. Like, it's weird and performative. Moving on to the House of Representatives, Jim Jordan has said that the Judiciary Committee, which he is the chair of, will continue to investigate Hunter Biden. This article from The Hill talks about it. Hunter Biden investigation will proceed after father leaves White House, Jordan says. Hunter Biden investigation is a huge waste of time. The House Judiciary Committee and the House Oversight Committee, led by James Comer, have been investigating Hunter Biden and his laptop for the better part of 2 years. They have all these outlandish claims that keep getting disproven. So it's wild to see that instead of focusing on grocery prices or crime or any of the other things they talked about during the campaign, they're going to continue whining about Hunter Biden's laptop. The California House GOP delegation this week, after spending the entire week attacking California and insulting firefighters, went down to Mar-a-Lago together to kiss the ring of Donald Trump. This article is from the Midas Touch Network, and if you're not following them, I highly recommend that you do. California Republicans flee to Mar-a-Lago as LA burns. Instead of providing leadership, they decided to kiss Trump's ring. According to this article, the entire California House delegation was there except David Valadao, who voted to impeach Trump after January 6th, interestingly enough, prioritized meeting with Trump over being in their state trying to help. And they weren't there talking with Trump about the fires. They were talking about his tax plan. The House GOP is the worst. In response to Trump's press conference, Marjorie Taylor Greene announced legislation to rename the Gulf of Mexico, and the Foreign Affairs Committee showed public support for Trump's plans to take Greenland, Panama, and Canada. The House Foreign Affairs Committee took down a different tweet that had the New York Post headline that said the Don Roe Doctrine, and they changed it to the Trump Doctrine to make it even more Trumpy. But they are fully supporting his plans to annex these countries. And the House GOP is set to pass a budget bill that cuts Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, and infrastructure funding. House GOP puts Medicaid, ACA, climate measures on chopping block. This article goes on to say that House Republicans are passing around a menu of more than $5 trillion in cuts they could use to bankroll President-elect Donald Trump's top priorities this year, including tax cuts and border security. And just to be clear, that would be tax cuts for the wealthy paid for by cutting Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, and any climate initiatives. The House Freedom Caucus, which is the most MAGA members of the House, met with Donald Trump and Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago this week. Eli Crane tweeted this out. "Great night at Mar-a-Lago with the House Freedom Caucus. We joined President Trump and Elon Musk for dinner to talk about the path forward." MAGA, who brags about being for the people, has fully accepted that Musk is their leader. It's pathetic. The oligarchy has taken over. Finally, in congressional news, Representative James Comer announced that the first hearing of the Oversight Committee will be about telework. They've been railing against telework for a long time, since 2020 basically. And again, instead of focusing on the important stuff, they are attacking people's right to work from home. This week, Trump held 2 different press conferences, and they were equally unhinged. I did a full video on the first one on January 7th from Mar-a-Lago, but just to recap, Trump, during that press conference, said he wouldn't rule out using military force against Greenland or Panama. He claimed Hezbollah was there on January 6th, and he said he'll overturn the new ban on offshore drilling, and he also promised a $20 billion investment from a Dubai billionaire for AI data centers. The next press conference was just a couple days later, and he was fielded softball questions from Peter Doocy of Fox News, and to summarize, he says he'll set something up with Putin when asked about whether he was going to end the war in Ukraine, which was one of his promises. He says, "We don't need Canada's lumber because we have forests." He said that some of them are protected, but I can take those protections off. And he's going to tell everybody what the mysterious drones over New Jersey were on day one. Thanks to Donald Trump's continued insane rhetoric about taking over sovereign nations, the rest of the world has started responding. Denmark says that they'll protect Greenland from any attacks. The president of Mexico said that we should just rename the United States Mexicana America. And the Panama president privately threatened to take Trump to the UN Security Council. And member of Canadian Parliament Elizabeth May gave a press conference in response to Trump's attacks.
I don't want to belittle Mr. Trump, but on the other hand, hey, Donald, have we got a deal for you? You think we want to be the 51st state? Nah, but maybe California would like to be the 11th province. How about it? California, Oregon, Washington, you've got geography in common with us. And not only that, we've already got a carbon trading system between California and Quebec. We've got some strong alliances on our west coast from British Columbia. There's been a lot of academic papers on the idea of Cascadia. To put a referendum to your citizens, because this is what you deal. Have we got a deal for you? This is what you get. Free health care. Universal free health care. No more 1-year-olds who suddenly fall off the Medicaid list and their parents are in the news because they're trying to do a GoFundMe so they can get their daughter to a doctor. Universal free health care. And guess what? Those gun laws that your Congress is too afraid to pass because of the national gun lobby, we already got our strict gun laws. That's why we have the safest streets around the world, or at least in the United States, by the way, the most recent stats, 5.9 out of every 100,000 people is killed in a fatal gun incident versus 0.88 per 100,000 in Canada. That's because we have strict gun laws. California citizens, Oregon, Washington, safer streets. Here we already have good gun laws, and women have a right to an abortion under our universal health care system.
Her entire press conference is worth the watch. She goes gloves off against Trump. She calls him out for being uneducated and gives a lesson on how Canadian government works. It's awesome, but the fact that she's even having to do it is insane and terrifying. And as someone who lives in one of the states she's mentioned, that is absolutely insane, though, that he is actively attacking our allies, and they're having to take it seriously and prepare for any potential attack coming from the United States. While at the same time, Canada and Mexico are sending firefighters to help with the situation in California. They're still our allies and they still want to help us, and Trump is trying to destroy that. Anyway, let's take a quick break from the craziness of Trump and talk about Republican influencers this week. Christopher Rufo is a board member of New College of Florida and was an active participant in the conservative takeover of that school. He has railed against CRT and DEI for a long time, and his new focus is apparently now on ASL interpreters. He tweeted this out, retweeting a post from End Wokeness, which is an awful transphobic account. He said, "I'm sorry, but we have to stop with the ridiculous sign language interpreters who turn serious press conferences into a farce. There are closed captions on all broadcast channels and streaming services. No wild human gesticulators necessary." My theory is that they're normalizing attacks on disability rights. ASL interpreters do a better job of communicating the way deaf and hard of hearing people do than closed captions, and closed captions are not always accurate. Rufo is bashing on them because MAGA Republicans want to cut funding for disability accessibility. They hate regulations, and the ADA requires businesses to be accessible, which costs money. Disability activists literally crawled up the steps of the Capitol to protest for their rights, not that long ago either, and the groundwork is being laid to dismantle those rights. There are a lot of Americans out there that take their rights for granted and don't understand the real fights that made our everyday lives easier. This is one of those things. Another MAGA influencer, Charlie Kirk, is using the fires in LA County as an opportunity to bash on women and the LGBTQIA community. He said, "Meet the people in charge of LA's fire response, all of them lesbians named Kristen." And then he goes on to talk about Kristen Larson being the first Black lesbian, Equity Bureau, whatever. Instead of using his massive platform to try and raise money for folks in need, he is attacking lesbians. The fire chief is extremely well qualified, but because she's a woman, she's a lesbian, it's a great opportunity for MAGA influencers to spread some bigotry and get engagement on Twitter. Speaking of Charlie Kirk, him and Donald Trump Jr. were in Greenland this past week, pretending that there was support for a MAGA takeover of the country. Well, just like everything Donald Trump is involved in, that turned out to be a scam. Greenland trip just took a dark turn. It appears the whole thing was staged. A MAGA visit intended to make Greenland look pro-Donald Trump appears staged from the bottom up. The so-called tourism trip saw Donald Trump Jr., far-right political pundit Charlie Kirk, and Trump administration staffer Sergio Gore visit the self-governing Danish territory at a time when the president-elect has made some odd jokes and eyebrow-raising militaristic threats about buying Greenland. Danish media reported Thursday that a series of photos featuring Kirk and Greenlandic residents in MAGA hats was staged. The MAGA cohort reportedly rounded up homeless people from the area, including one person from under a bridge, promising them a meal at the Hotel Hans Egede in exchange for their participation in the pro-Trump photo circuit. Here's one of the staged pictures with Donald Trump Jr. and a bunch of homeless Greenlanders. Steve Bannon is another Republican influencer who also is very deeply involved in campaigns and in Trump world. He and Elon Musk have been warring. Steve Bannon is an awful person, but for all of his flaws, he doesn't like the oligarchy. He genuinely is like, or at least tries to appear to be a man of the people, so he's been calling Elon Musk out. This article from The Guardian says Steve Bannon condemns Elon Musk as racist and truly evil. Ex-Trump advisor denounces tech CEO's embrace of some forms of immigration and vows to take this guy down. It's crazy to hear Steve Bannon, of all people, call someone evil, but his idea of why he's evil is because Elon Musk likes HB1 visas, so In an escalation of discontent among the highest profile far-right followers of Donald Trump, his former advisor Steve Bannon has called Trump's newest favorite, Elon Musk, racist and a truly evil guy, pledging to take this guy down and kick him out of the MAGA movement. In an interview with the Italian newspaper, excerpts of which were published this weekend by Breitbart, which is Steve Bannon's media company, Bannon criticized Musk's embrace of some forms of immigration and vowed to ensure that Musk does not have top-level access to the White House. He is a truly evil guy, a very bad guy. I made it my personal thing to take this guy down, Bannon said. Before, because he put money in, I was prepared to tolerate it. I'm not prepared to tolerate it anymore. That's interesting, Steve Bannon. He added, I will have Elon Musk run out of here by Inauguration Day, which falls on January 20th. He will not have full access to the White House. He will be like any other person. This is going to be a really interesting fight to follow along with. Is Trump going to choose Steve Bannon, who's been with him since the beginning and is a pretty powerful political operative? Or is he going to choose Elon Musk, who's brand new but has hundreds of billions of dollars behind him? And our last influencer for this week is Andrew Tate, who recently announced that he was starting a new political party and running for Prime Minister of the UK. He was on Benny Johnson's show this week. Benny Johnson is another MAGA influencer, with Alina Habba. Habba is Trump's lead counsel, and she was very excited to be talking to Andrew Tate. If you don't know who Tate is, he is a misogynistic nightmare of a person who is under investigation in Romania for human trafficking, rape, and forming an organized crime group to sexually exploit women.
Alina.
Hi.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. I'm a big fan.
Well, nice
Big
to meet
fan.
you. I'm a fan. You're the one saving Trump. You're doing more important work than me.
America, not just Trump. And I agree with everything you just said. And I think that your anger is the same that President Trump has for our country. And the time is now for us to stop being wimps. I think that's exactly the right sentiment. And I also have to say that I sympathize with you because I think you go through a lot of the same, show me the person, I'll find the crime that President Trump has gone through. And
So yeah, Alina Habba, who is Trump's lead counsel, and Trump is supposed to be the leader of the Family First MAGA party, is a big fan of Andrew Tate and thinks that he is facing legal attacks similar to Trump. Speaking of Trump and lawyers, he faced sentencing this week for his 34 felonies, and he was given no prison time, no punishment whatsoever, really. Jack Smith is going to be releasing the partial report of his investigations into Donald Trump. The portion on the classified documents isn't going to be released publicly. Merrick Garland is trying to release it to the Senate, but Trump's co-defendants in it are trying to block that. The case was dismissed by Judge Eileen Cannon out of Florida, but the government is appealing the dismissal of that case. So Walt Nauta, who's one of the co-defendants, is basically saying that he doesn't think it would be fair if the Senate had their hands on the final report. There's also news in the tech bro world as tech companies begin to bow down to Trump in really weird ways. Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, has said that Facebook, Instagram, all the Meta properties will no longer do fact-checking. Instead, they're going to do like Elon Musk's Twitter and have community notes. Mark Zuckerberg was also on Joe Rogan whining about the Biden administration forcing him to take stuff down during COVID because he was spreading disinformation. Zuckerberg claims the White House was pressuring them to censor misinformation during the pandemic. They brought this up in a lot of House hearings the past couple of years with the Twitter files and all that nonsense. Essentially, they're claiming that Joe Biden was forcing them to censor dangerous lies about COVID and the Hunter Biden laptop story, which is ridiculous because all of that nonsense was going on in 2020 when Biden was not in fact president. And if you've been on Facebook in the past decade, you would know that misinformation runs wild on there. So if Biden was censoring them before he was even president, then he's pretty bad at it. And another thing, they were saying that the Hunter Biden laptop story was being censored. It was literally one tweet that Twitter took down, one tweet about the Hunter Biden laptop story from the New York Post that they took down and put back up a week later. But during that week, it had been spread everywhere. Literally everyone knows about the Hunter Biden laptop story. They couldn't tell you what it means or what it's about, but everybody knows about it. So this whole White House is censoring social media is stupid and a lie. Amazon this past week paid Melania Trump $40 million for the rights to some crappy documentary that she produced about her. Meta is also removing trans and non-binary themes from their platforms, which were pretty performative to begin with, but the act of removing them is a bigger performance, and MAGA influencers and politicians are rejoicing. And Biden spoke up this past week about tech companies, and he called them out for spreading disinformation.
You think it doesn't matter that they let be printed where millions of people read it, things that are simply not true? I mean, I want to know what that's all about. It's just completely contrary to everything America's about. We want to tell the truth. We haven't always done it as a nation, but we want to tell the truth. And the idea that, a billionaire can buy something and say, by the way, from this point on, we're not gonna fact check anything. And when you have millions of people going online, reading this stuff, it is, anyway, I think it's really shameful.
Biden is right. It's crazy that these billionaires have just turned their social media companies into playgrounds for disinformation and lies. It's really shameful, and it has real life consequences. People have gotten a lot more insane because of the constant lies they are fed by social media algorithms and the mainstream media, which is all owned by Republicans. Moving on to the state level this week, Idaho Republicans have issued a measure to try and push the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell. Obergefell was the landmark court decision that recognized same-sex marriage federally. And ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned, Republicans have been chomping at the bit to come for the rest of our rights, and it looks like Idaho Republicans are going to be the first ones to come for same-sex marriage. A judge also overthrew Biden's Title IX expansion that protected LGBTQIA athletes following a lawsuit from Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, Virginia, and West Virginia, which Republicans will say that they are against trans athletes in sports because they want to protect cis women, but trans bans affect cis women and girls just as much, if not more, than trans women. We can look to Utah recently for an example. Women once had their own climbing night. Now they don't due to the Utah legislature. Utah passed HB 261, which is a anti-DEI law, and because this climb night was inclusive and allowed trans women and non-binary folks to attend, it is now illegal under the state law. So before this law was passed, these kids at this college were able to go to a climbing gym and have a couple hours once a week carved out where it was women only, and they could feel safe and comfortable in a male-dominated sport. And it had nothing to do with the government. But now the state of Utah passed this law, and women aren't allowed to have their own time at this climbing gym anymore. So much for small government. The last thing I want to talk about from this week is the fires in California. I'm not going to be talking about the specifics about containment or any of that because I'm not qualified and there are plenty of other resources for that. I am going to post some links down below to places that you can donate if you're able to. What I want to talk about is the Republican response to the fire. As people are being evacuated and losing their homes and dying, Republicans are out there blaming DEI and blaming woke and blaming Governor Newsom for not allowing more water. They're blaming everything except climate change because at this point, they can't acknowledge that it's climate change. Scott Jennings on CNN, he's a Republican who gets to just spew racism on the CNN panel for some reason. He was whining that there's not enough white firefighters, and Representative Jasmine Crockett called him out.
Recall a news story from last year. There was some interest in the fire departments and the firefighters in California, and the interest was that there were too many white men who were firefighters, and we need to have a program in California to make sure we don't have enough white men as firefighters. So we have DEI, we have budget cuts, and yet I'm wondering now if your house is burning down, how much do you care what color the firefighters are?
You can respond and then
Listen, I am so tired. You know what? There was an article that just came out that said that actually the most educated demographic in this country right now is black women. So let me be clear. because you are a woman, or because I know that some of the right has been sharing these photos of the fact that I believe that the fire chief may be a woman or something. That has nothing to do with it. We are looking at qualifications. What diversity, equity, and inclusion has always been about is saying, you know what? Open this up. Don't just look at the white men. Open it up and recognize that other people can be qualified. And the fact that we want to, at a time when people are dying, decide that a country of immigrants is failing, or people are dying because the same very people that built this country, because the last time I checked, y'all didn't say that anything was wrong with the White House. And I can promise you, it was my ancestors that built the White House. So listen, if we have been good enough to build this country, we are good enough to serve and die overseas, we are good enough to serve in other ways. And the fact that people actually decide that they want to engage in public service, whether it's sitting in Congress or whether it's serving on the fire department or the police department, should not be an issue. The fact is, stop trying to act as if only white men are the ones that are capable. Because right now, you're sitting at a table with 3 very capable black women.
Jasmine Crockett is amazing. She's a great messenger. But yeah, this whole thing is so weird. Republicans are just like attacking the firefighters out of California, being mad that the fire chief is a lesbian, and blaming the mayor of LA, Karen Bass, for everything that's happening. Trump has been spreading this wild lie that Gavin Newsom refused to sign the water restoration declaration because he wanted to protect some fish. But there's no such declaration. Like, it literally doesn't exist. He's just making stuff up. And I'm not saying that California is perfect and that there wasn't any mismanagement, but the fire chief herself, even in an interview where she acknowledged that they do need more funding and that there were budget cuts, she even recognizes that more money and more firemen and more trucks would not have helped, because the real issue here is the climate and the massive winds that were coming through the valley and the lack of rainfall that California has gotten. Climate change is the problem. And like I said, Republicans can't admit that. So they're just going to blame woke. They're going to blame black people. They're going to blame lesbians. They're going to blame women. Governor Newsom was asked to respond to the attacks coming from Trump, and he gave a great response.
Are literally fleeing. People have lost their lives. Kids lost their schools. Families completely torn asunder. Churches burned down. This guy wanted to politicize it. I have a lot of thoughts, and I know what I want to say. I won't. I stood next to a president of the United States of America today, and I was proud to be with Joe Biden. And he had the backs of every single person in this community. He didn't play politics, didn't try to divide any of us.
And Trump has the audacity to insult the people of California and their politicians and their firefighters when, while he was president the last time, he refused aid to California until his staff showed him that the area affected actually voted for him. He's a petty monster. Another crazy thing that's been happening during these fires is homeowners insurance has straight up just been canceling insurance on people, and Kamala Harris called them out for it.
On that point, I will also make note of the fact that, sadly, many insurance companies have canceled insurance for a lot of the families who have been affected and will be affected, which is only going to delay or place an added burden on their ability to recover. And I think that is an important point that must be raised, and hopefully there can be some way to address that issue, because these families, so many of them, otherwise will not have the resources to recover in any meaningful way. And many of them have lost everything.
We could have had a president who actually cares about people, and instead we have a president-elect who's tweeting out attacks on Black people and lesbians and making up lies about water restoration acts that don't exist, and his MAGA horde is piling on behind him. Trump's not even president yet, and the world is already suffering and preparing for his inauguration. The climate disasters are going to get worse. More rights are going to be chipped away. And if you like the work I'm doing, like and subscribe, share this with your friends, and let's stay informed. Because I'm going to continue to do whatever I can to spread truth and facts and call out MAGA fascism everywhere I can. Thanks for watching.